We'll start. Hi everybody, my name is Imran. I work for Glue. We have a studio here in Hyderabad. And today we will talk about the road ahead for mobile game development. It's how I see things actually happening for mobile game. And I'd like to sort of have this as more of an interactive session. So please stop me whenever you feel you have a question and you would like to ask a question about it. So let's talk a little bit about Glue. Glue is a private company. It is listed in NASDAQ and it is centered in San Francisco. We have studios all across the world. We are working in Russia, Brazil, Sao Paulo, and China, and we are in India now. So, and of course, there are a couple of studios in US. So we were making feature phone games earlier. Then we moved on to making mobile social games, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because that's our main line of business, and that's how we've been growing. Show of hands, please. How many people here have played at least maybe one of these games? That's pretty good. And I'm thinking Frontline Commando, right? Frontline Commando, please. That's, yeah. Deer Hunter? Couple of good ones. Okay. Contract Killer, the biggest title, yeah. Everybody here is an assassin, all right. So, as you can see, Glue does well on action games. We are big on action titles. This is our bread and butter, and we've been making these games for a while now. Our story, the story of Hyderabad studio is a little different. We were a part of Foundation 9 earlier, and Glue bought the Foundation 9 studio in US, and sort of the Hyderabad unit went along with that. And so, as a part of Foundation 9, Gripnite used to make handheld games, which was our main line of business before. And when we switched to Glue, we were making this mobile social game. So, and what we see in the type of games that come out of Glue, we see that more of the action genre sort of does well for us. So our studio is kind of known for that one. So we make immersive games, we make action games, and we make freemium games. So action, freemium is our genre. So what does India Studio do? India Studio works on, worked on a title which came out last year sometime in June. Actually, this year sometime in June. And this is a hunting sim, and we used, you might have attended Unity workshop. We used that engine to develop this game. And it had about 10 million download on the App Store. It's one of our most successful titles. The one thing about premium games or action games is it's about how immersive it is. So we did take care of actually talking to some of the hunters who kind of go out there and hunt. The first thing they said is that we want our environments to be really immersive. We want the animals to look really natural. You can't have a jerky animal, it just totally spoils the environment. And the second thing they did, the third thing and the most important thing they said is that we would like to enjoy a game which allows us to precision hunt, which is what hunters talk about. So when they go out hunting together, they talk about, hey, I had a head shot, I had a lung shot, or I had a heart shot. So that's how they rate their hunts. So those are the three things we took care of. We made immersive environments, which were very deep and kind of all around the northwest Pacific corner of US, and even south, I think, a little bit of the south arid zone. So if you played this game, you will see that the environments are very deep, their minds are very immersive. The animals, we spent a lot of time on working on the animals. We made sure that they are as natural as possible, and of course their behaviors are also captured in that. Plus the weapons and how we designed the weapons in the gameplay was very close to what the actual hunting like, what actual hunting feels like, which is what we got out of people. And the other thing we gave is that this is that X-ray mode I'm talking about. We wrote some really nice code which actually shows you the different organs of an animal, and each of your mission is timed, and you have to shoot each of those, or like, take a shot at whatever you've been asked to shoot. So this is one of the games we worked out of India. All right. So that's a little bit about what we do and who we are. So what are we talking about here? So first of all, I want to show of hands of how many developers do we have here? How many mobile social developers? Okay, how many game designers? Okay, great. How many people who were developing console games but are developing mobile social games now? Okay. How many people who were developing mobile games but don't know where to go from here? That's what we want to discuss today. We want to discuss, because basically when you say, okay, well, I want to do mobile games, but then there are so many options out there. There's your Apple devices, there's your Androids, there's your Windows 8s, which happen out here, and then you have got your Blackberries. There are so many options. So the question that comes up in your mind is, well, what am I doing? What am I doing, like, working on mobiles? What should be my, feature device? How do I go about it? Everybody is on Apple, and they kind of talk about Androids as something that they want to do. Some other people talk about, hey, BlackBerry is now going to be really big. Or Microsoft says, hey, Windows is really going to be big. Should you be going towards that? What should I do? That's the questions that, I'm sure you have in your mind. And, I'd like you to take a minute to sort of think about what your big question is for mobile game development, whatever that may be. And I'm hoping that through the session, that question will be answered. If not, we will probably do a Q&A later. But I'd like you to take a minute to actually think of your question and say, okay, this is my big question. I'd like you to think about that. So basically, when you start off making a game, it always starts with a 10-second pitch. So I completely believe in the 10-second pitch. If you have a really good 10-second pitch, your game is going to be good. If it is unique, if it is nice, and if it appeals to people, your game is going to be awesome. So let's pick a sample 10-second pitch. This is something I just wrote up in yesterday actually. I was thinking about what type of game do I want to make. But it wasn't important. What I want to tell you is that, the pitch has all the components of what your game will need to have. The pitch has all the components of what your game needs to have. So for example, if I say Zombie Kill is a free-to-play social tower defense game for casual gamers targeted at smartphone market. What does that mean? It means that free-to-play is the way that I want to monetize my game. That means I want to give away my game, but I would like to actually do IAPs inside. It's a social game. What does it mean? It means my game will have some type of a network in it, a social friends network, where I'll either do PvP or I'll bring friends to sort of invite friends to help me out on my farm, my zombie farm. I don't know. Tower defense is the type of the game, the core mechanic of the game. So you're looking at maybe a fortress that you're building and zombies coming and attacking you. That's your tower defense. And it's for casual gamers. It's not for serious gamers. It means your graphics will not be really immersive. Your graphics will be casual. It will be very cartoony, semi-cartoony it will be. Because you want to appeal to casual gamers. Something that loads up very quickly, because if you have more of rich content, it takes a long time to load. So you want a game which quickly loads up and plays, and so that you appeal to the casual gamers, and you want to target it towards a smartphone market. So you kind of figured that most of the people these days are buying either some type of smartphone. We'll figure out what that phone is. But right now you're saying there's a lot of smartphones out there. I would like to actually target my game towards that. So you're putting smartphone on that. So your pitch, and please take, whenever you're writing your game vision, take time to write that pitch, because in that pitch, you will have all the components of your game. And in that pitch or that vision of your game will decide how good or how bad your game is, where will you sell it, how will you sell it, who will you sell it to, and even how to develop that game, which is what I'm going to show it to you guys, that this is how it's going to go. Okay. So in the bottom you will see I've kind of marked it as mobile, casual. So you will see these dots that appear in different screens, and I'm trying to address that need in that slide. Okay. All right, so so question appears is that, okay, well, I have a pitch, I know what I'm developing, and I'm kind of looking at where to go from here. So the big question that appears in your mind is that I'm already a developer of some kind. In our case, we were handheld developers. We did 3DS games, or we had we did Sony PS Vita type of games. So the question that appears is, I'm already doing good. Why should I move on to mobile games? We are okay. So in our case, this is the chart that actually convinced us. In 2009, as you can see, Nintendo DS was grossing about 70% of your revenue. Mobile was about 19%, which is like fairly decent, but nothing big. You're kind of watching it grow. In a year before, it was probably around 5 to 6%, when it grew to 19%. Not too bad. 2010, it grew almost double. That's a concern, because you're like thinking, my revenue is shrinking, but the other thing which is growing is mobile. So you start seriously considering it. It's like, okay, mobile maybe is where people are going towards, So you start thinking, what should be my strategy? And by the time 2011 comes by, if you hadn't moved, you were already dead by that time. Right? So when you were in 2010, you should have made up your mind that, yeah, that is a significant piece of market, and I would like to be there. Which is why, we made our decision that we would now sort of want to move on to iOS or any of the mobile development platforms. So that question is decided. Okay, you decided that, okay, I was a handheld developer, or I was a Flash developer, or I was a web programmer of some sort. Now, seems like all the people are moving to mobile. I'd like to do something there. And the reasons would be your own, whether you would like to actually increase the people that you want to have as your customers, whether the revenues are shrinking for you, or whatever the reason be. You kind of decided that, okay, I want to move on. So mobile is now going to be like the thing that you want to develop. So the pitch that you had kind of started making sense to you now. It's like, okay, well, I thought, or the pitch would have, if I were a handheld developer, I would have said, zombie kill, but I want to do it on a 3DS platform, right? My pitch would have changed. The smartphone would have been taken away, I would have put a handheld on it. But now I'm saying smartphone because my revenue says so, because that says, if another year, if it grows the same way, if I don't switch, then I will lose all my customers. So that's why this 10-second pitch is important. And I'm coming back to the slide, because I want you to make sure that when you write your slides, when you write your pitch, you are clear about your goals. Okay. All right. So you're like, okay, fine. I'm kind of ready to move on to mobile now, and you're looking at all the options that you have, and you hear names like Microsoft, Google, Apple, Nokia, RIM, all these guys who provide hardwares, all options that are thrown out. It's like, okay, here's your gamut of hardware that you have available. Now go choose and do what you have to. So you start writing down all the variables that you have to deal with to actually say, okay, what are my options to pick my smartphone, or how do I go about it? Or this is what you look at at your ecosystem. When you look at your OS, you think, well, iOS, Android, Win 7, BlackBerry, Symbian, companies, you have so many hardwares, so many hardware providers, form factors, you've got so many, stores, you've got 5 odd, and there are more, and OEM, so many guys providing phones. So now you're thinking, okay, I've decided that I wanted to make a game for smartphone, but which one is my right choice? Should I pick an Android or should I pick a BlackBerry? Should I pick an iOS? What would be my smart choice? You know? And you're thinking, how am I even going to actually pick my options through this? So should I pick an Android which is on Nokia? Should I pick an Android which is on Google with the Qualcomm chipset or an ARM chipset? Or what type of form factor should I make? Because now you're thinking, okay, the zombie game that I'm making is on a smartphone or a smart tablet or a smartphone variant. But you're thinking, these are my options. Now, how do I go about picking the right one? So you probably go back to, everybody has talked about analytics here a lot, and I think they help a lot. You should always watch out for what's happening in the industry. So you sort of go and say, okay, well, show me the smartphone market share by OS and by operating system. Let me take the first variable and see where they are. You see how Android has gone over a period of like maybe 2 years, 3 years that is shown here. It's gone from 5% on to capturing about 50% of the market. Apple's kind of been steady. They have, this was at 2011 was the time when they released more form factors, better OSs, better services through their phone. So they kind of bumped into like, Google a little bit. Symbian was the worst. So the guys who were developing mobile at 2009, they were actually looking at, oh yes, like Nokia phones are the best phones to make games for. They were doing probably Java or Symbian-based programming. They kind of started dropping off because there's no sort of people wanting to buy Nokia phones. People moving on to Android or some other types. BlackBerry business phones were kind of dropping off because iOS and Androids were now catching up. So where does this leave us? There was like coming back to this slide. So you were looking at OS, which is iOS, Android, Win 7, BlackBerry, Symbian, and you're thinking, oh, like too many options out here. I don't know which one to pick for. This guy comes in and he says, well, the smart strategy is at 2012, if you pick the numbers, the last bit, you pretty much covered about 70% of your market if you pick Android or an Apple, which means if you're putting out your game on Android or on iOS, you're covering about 70% of the market, which is a fair bit of market, which is pretty decent. So now you're thinking, okay, I started my game not knowing what I should be picking for, but it looks like I'll be working on Android and iOS. That's what my strategy tells me. So you kind of decide that, okay, fine, that's the platforms that I want to work for. Then the other question that comes into mind is that, okay, well, I'm picking 2 platforms, or maybe even 3 for that matter. Symbian is still an option for you because you were a Symbian developer of some sort. You kind of knew how to work with that platform. So you kind of want to develop a game, and trust me, when you're writing a game, what you want to do is that you want to write it once and be able to actually have it work on all sorts of platforms. But having these 3 options, which is like your Android or an Apple or a Symbian, you have the problem that you now have to adapt that same game to either an Android, an Apple, or a Symbian. So what do? You start looking at their OS architectures. You start looking into, okay, what is the core of this? How do I develop for this? So you look at Android and say, okay, it runs on a Linux kernel, but has a JVM of its own. You look at iOS, and you look at it and say, it's got a BSD kernel, but a totally different API, right? Cocoa Touch. You are looking at, say, a Symbian. It runs on the Symbian OS, but a totally different, layer above it, which has got its own API. So you're now trying to figure out, if I'm writing an application for Android, how will it run on an iPhone and also on a Symbian? So that's where it starts, your options start narrowing down. Your priorities start coming into picture. You start thinking, what should I do? One way out is you start thinking, okay, I'll develop a Java application. Why? Because, you've pretty much got, Java apps on this that run. Now, I can probably run my JVM on top of this and be able to run my Java apps. But then the problem there is that not all JVMs are the same. So if you're writing a Java app for, say, Google JVM, may not run on the other JVMs that are around because maybe there's a mismatch in the API or there's a different set of standards for all JVMs. So all that write once and run everywhere philosophy goes out the window because now everyone has got their own JVMs. And that's a big problem because now Java is out of the window. They're like, you can't do any more of Java games. So you start thinking, well, what is the standard strategy? So you start looking back into your history and thinking, okay, well, I was a console game programmer and I was very good at it. Why was I very good? Because when I said I'm developing a game for an Xbox, I exactly knew what the operating system was. I exactly knew what the hardware was on that and how I would go and develop games for that. So you start thinking, are there any platforms like that here? So what is an Xbox? Xbox is a hardware which has got a Windows layer above it and it's got a standard API. So let's just look at that three, right? So you start looking at, okay, these three guys, and by the way, Nemo Linux is actually picking up a lot. It's one of the, in my understanding, that is the platform that should pick up more. You start looking at iPhone and you're thinking, well, this is pretty much like how a closed platform, gaming platform was. It's got a hardware layer, it's got a standard kernel, it's got a touch API, and that's about it. Like, you know, and it's got a pretty standard interface. And I'll show you in the next slide what I mean by a standard interface. And you know, this is also pretty good. But the problem with Android is that because the OS is free, Google is giving it off for free. A lot of OEMs have picked up the OS and have implemented it on different hardwares. One is doing it on, say, Qualcomm, the other one is on some other chipset. So the layer underneath this has changed completely. Maybe this remains the same, but suppose you're developing an application which was in Java and you were depending on the gyrometer to be actually there. Maybe the other phone, which is an Android phone, by the way, running the same OS, but doesn't have a gyrometer under it. So the key feature that you were trying to develop for is not there in the other one. Whereas on an iPhone, it's locked. If you say Apple device has gyrometer, all the Apple phones have gyrometers, right? So that's what's good about, like, you know, Apple. That's what they did nice. They said, we don't want to give you the OS. We will lock the phone. We will control it. We will make sure that you will get quality products. But Google said the other way around. They said, well, we'll give you the OS. Go ahead and go do what you think it is right. So essentially what happened is that this graph you see for Android is actually a combination of all OEMs picking up and saying, we'll go ahead and start implementing that. So it's not just Google. It is a lot of those OEMs providing the phones. So coming back to this, you kind of understood, well, you know, you kind of made up your mind that Java may not be the right solution for me because, you know, the platforms underneath the software that Android is providing are not standard. And that's also, it doesn't work because the same JVMs are not there across. So, like, you know, Java may not be the best strategy. And you're looking for a console-like place, which is console-like environment, which is what Apple does for you. So, in my opinion, like, you know, gaming-wise, or for games, iPhone-like platforms are good because they are closed loop. And I'll explain to you what a closed loop means. So this is a little bit into the architecture. I was going to use this to talk about the stuff that I talked about, but pretty much you've got different ways of working with an Android. You could be writing applications here using different libraries and going down to the kernel, and which is again interacting with the hardware, right? Now, if the hardware underneath changes, some of the features out here are not available. So whatever you're writing may not work on different Android phones, but they'll be called Android phones, okay? But for iPhone, it's a very simple interface. There is multiple options. You write your application in the application layer. It has a standard API. So if it works on one phone, or a phone, iPhone 4, it'll work on a phone 4S. It'll work on, if it works on a 3GS, it'll work on all the other form factors. What does it mean for you? That means you will write your game once and be sure that it will work on all devices that will come across. So essentially what you're telling yourself now is that, like, you know, I'm looking at this screen now, which tells me that I have a lot of people who use Androids, but iPhones look like the most stable platform for me where I want to develop games, right? So coming back to this slide, you start thinking, okay, all right, I've got a couple of my options figured out now. I have figured out that from iOS and Android, there's a good strategy to sort of pick iOS and Android. And it's a, like, you know, sort of like, you know, Android still iffy, but iOS I definitely want to do. And of course, the companies underneath it. The other questions we'll answer, form factor and hardware and other things, we'll answer a little bit later. Okay, but now we are kind of, the story is pretty stable, that we know we need iOS to sort of work on games. All right, so this graphic went around as a joke, I know. Many of you probably got this graphic saying that, you know, iOS has pretty much stayed the same, but Android has evolved. This has been the evolution for iOS over 5 years or 4 years worth of work that they've done. But what in my opinion, first time I looked at it, I laughed too. I was like, yeah, this is the same, you know. But then when you start looking at it in a different way, it's like, I have written my games for maybe in 2008 I wrote a game, right? Which was working on this phone, and 2009 or between 2008 2009 I wrote something, and App Store came around and it started distributing that game, and that game is guaranteed to work 2 years later on the phones that, like, I'm putting out or Apple's putting out. Whereas here I wrote a game for, say, 2010. I can't remember what this is. Either it's a HTC or some other phone. I wrote for that phone. But then so many new phones came by, and now my game looks all weird. You know, it's like it's got bars in it. The things are just moved, and I'm like, dang, I have to write my game again. I have to port it to this whole thing again. So now you as a developer are having to do extra work just because somebody else came out with a new form factor. So it's not a good strategy because you're working just to provide service rather than now working on newer games. So, you know, when I say, well, actually you're probably reading this, Android is pretty much an open platform in the sense that the OEMs, like, you know, Google gives away the Android OS and the OEMs promote the development. But the problem with that is every form factor or every feature phone has got a different feature set. So if you're writing a game for Gyro, it may be in one Android phone, may not be in one Android phone, but it will be called an Android phone. Whereas on an iOS, you are guaranteed to have that feature set, which is good for games because now, to look back at the comparison from Xbox, all Xboxes are same, right? This is like that. It is pretty much like that. It is a standard API, always guarantees the features that you want, and it makes sure that those features work the way they should work. The other things are kind of the other important issues. We will come to it, one after the other. Most important thing I want you to take away from this slide is that if you had worked on that zombie game in 2009, you're probably still making money in 2011, if it were a game that you were making money on. Whereas if the same game deployed on a different form factor, you are probably updating it for newer Android phones that came by. So that's a big thing for you because if you write it once, you want to move on and do other things. You know, so right. So now let's look at, like, you know, one of the points that I wrote about here is, I said stable development platform. What does a stable development platform mean? A stable development platform means that no matter which version of the OS that I'm working for, it is always guaranteed that I will have no matter how many upgrades that will happen from there. So let's look at OS, Apple OS upgrades, you know. So they did a big upgrade, iPhone 4 in around 2011, and A lot of people bought new hardware. So every time they kind of update their software, they also come out with either a new phone or something cool about that a phone. And you see that in iOS 6 probably happened a couple of months ago, maybe 3-4 months ago. And you will be surprised, about 60% of the people who have devices, iOS devices, all upgraded their devices to iOS 6 immediately. What does that mean? That means that if I am actually, I am guaranteed to have about 60% of the people up on the nicest OS that is offered by Apple. And you had nothing to do with it. Apple controlled it all. How did they do it? Because they control the devices, they control the App Store, they control the iTunes. That's how you upgrade software on your device. So if they put out a operating system, most of the people go for it. They sucked on a couple of things. The maps sucked. They sucked really bad. But the rest of the things just work fine. You know? And the other thing that happened with that is that the game that was working for your 3GS and your iPhone 4 still work for iOS 6. What does this mean? This means that no matter how many upgrades I get, which is the phone's getting better and better, phone OS getting better and better, my game will always work. And that's a good thing for games. That's a really good thing for games. Whereas if I compare with my Android, now this is something I took off of Android's website. You will see that there's a big upgrade that happened with Gingerbread, and then the next big upgrade that is happening is with Ice Cream Sandwich and Jelly Bean. But you can see how much is the fragmentation between devices. So if you say, okay, well, I'm developing my zombie kill game for an Android game. The question you will ask yourself is, for which phone and where is the operating system? You have no control over it. Because everybody who owns an Android phone, they don't say, I own a Gingerbread or I own a Jelly Bean. They say, I own an Android. But when you say, I own an Apple phone, they all say iOS 6. You can specify what is there on that phone, but not for an Android because of this. And what is the reason? Why is this happening? Why is this fragmentation in Android? You know, this is one of the reasons. The upper graphic is a little old. But what happens here is that if you can see, you know, the Apple, any release that they have, either an iOS or an iOS release or an iOS update, they put it on iTunes, it gets on all devices immediately. Whereas when Android puts out a release, it has to go through some OEM which had picked it up earlier and had provided you a phone. What does that mean? That means that OEMs are now investing time on actually like putting out an update. And Android does not have any control on anything that they're putting out themselves. So going back up, this is why a lot of people stayed back on Gingerbread, because the HTCs and the LGs never upgraded the operating system. They said, well, we're not doing this, because they might have invested a lot of time in creating really cool interfaces that made it a feature phone, but then it takes so much more time every time Google comes out with a new update. So they said, well, we're going to stay there, right? So all those guys who bought Gingerbread phones are going to be probably stuck with that, unless the OEM provides with an update. Or, like, you know, or you buy a newer phone, which then happens to be at a different layer, which is Ice Cream Sandwich, which is where we are. Well, many people are now buying ice cream sandwiches. So what does this mean? This means that your phones are now divided between Gingerbread and ice cream sandwich. So if you're writing your game, if you would have wanted to write your game against Ice Cream Sandwich, you probably couldn't, because 50% of people are still stuck at Gingerbread. And you probably are not guaranteed to have the security features and the advanced features that like, you know, Google provided with Ice Cream Sandwich. This is not a stable platform for games. Okay? Whereas we've got Apple, which means that almost all devices can always upgrade to iOS 6. Coming back to this slide, you know, the first point is that it says iOS is a stable platform, and, you know, consistent features across all versions. So you're guaranteed to make sure that whenever you write a game, it works all across the platforms. All right. The other thing that happens with Apple and and Google is that how many people here have wondered, are using Androids and have wondered when they're buying an app from any app store or somebody sends them an app in mail or either from a website that you download, you're wondering whether I'm good enough to download this because it does not have a certificate on it, because I'm not sure what it will do to my hardware, right? So you're always wondering whether my device is okay. Well, not for Apple, because there's only one way of downloading apps to your phone. I'm not talking about the jailbroken ones. I'm talking about the regular phone. That's through iTunes, and Apple controls all of that, which is Apple makes sure that your iPhones are always, your phones are always taken care of. Whereas because we have less of a control from Google, they're not really strict on imposing what those apps look like. They don't have a policy about rejecting apps right, left, and center, like how Apple does. What does Apple do? You send them an app, they say, we don't like the way you have, put the font on this, rejected, But why is Apple doing that? You're wondering, why is Apple doing that? Why are they being such hard asses, Because they want a consistent environment where people, when they download the apps, they're guaranteed to have a good experience. Well, Android doesn't say that. Android says we are free, come deploy your app, whatever. So when I'm a hobbyist, I can put up any app and say it works and sort of syncs up your Outlook and Google contacts. And I'm thinking, okay, great, let's download it. Does not have a certificate on it. And then let's try it and let's see how it goes. Next thing you know, your contacts are all gone. Happens all the time. But not on Apple, because Apple tests that app and make sure that your apps are running right. That's the stable platform that I'm talking about. So when you're developing your game for an Apple, people will download that game without thinking much. They're not wondering whether you've done the right thing, whether it will screw up their phones or do anything wrong with that. So they'll download immediately and try it, which is where premium games works the best. It's like, you want people to download for free. You don't want people to be worried about whether this game will screw me up or not. Just download, play, enjoy it. If you like it, keep the game, or else move on. Security. That's something that I was also talking about. Is Apple has a very typical security policy, publish policy. They want you to send the app. They'll review it for 2 to 3 weeks. They will then update it into iTunes. You don't have any control on whether that app goes onto iTunes or not. Beyond that, they even monitor some of the app behaviors. And there have been cases where they have banned apps from App Store because they have violated some of the policies that are there from App Store. Not so much on Android. You can pretty much develop a phone, IPK file, send it to anybody through mail, or put it up on your website and say download and sort of use it. There is a certification process. If you want to use, you can use that, and then Google will actually provide you that certificate and provide you a service of putting it on the the Android store, Google Play Store. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the security policy on Android versus Apple is Apple has a very strict policy on what they want to do. So if you're doing games, if you're working on games, and you want people to download the games without bothering or without bothering whether it will work or not, and if you want to make sure that all the money that you are earning will be coming to you, you need a secure platform, something like Apple. So Apple is providing not just the hardware, they're also providing an ecosystem for building the games. Android's now catching up to them. They have a good security policy, they have a store. They didn't have a store for a long time. By the way, you'll be surprised, but maybe only a month ago, Google said that now India can deploy apps which they'll be able to directly incentivize. Otherwise, we had no way, from India, you had no way of earning money on Google Play. So they're catching up, but they have a long way to go from where Apple is. So we looked at this slide, right? This is my main points. This is what I want you to take away from this discussion. It's not always, so Android caught up in the market because it wanted to sell feature phones, which the OEMs were interested in selling. But they are not interested in actually doing anything for the platform. They just want to sell phones. They are not interested in how they play, like, whether you're playing games or you're doing apps or whatever. Apple's interested in not only providing the devices, but also providing you a place where you can play games and have a good experience with all their devices, a consistent experience all the devices. Because the more you engage with the phone, the more you engage with Apple, the more you will buy from Apple, which is what happened. It's like you're buying more of Apple. And that's why the revenues on iOS are higher as compared to Android. So let's go over a little bit of, I'll come back to the slide a little later. So this is the revenue that, you see in stores, the mobile app revenues that you see. They're self-explanatory. Apple's kind of killing it everywhere. Apple's also, the number of apps on Google and this thing are catching up, but you can see that there was a lot of difference till about July 11th last quarter, but they've kind of caught up now, and I think recently they released that they have leveled up to where Apple is. But the question that you have to ask is, what kind of apps? What kind of experience do they provide? That's what you need to ask when you compare Android versus Google. Sorry, Android versus Apple. And the other thing you should look at is the same story. We're coming back to the same slide, but so these are the people who are making more money in most of the money. This graphic tells you about how the money gets distributed. Top 3 countries by download is US, China, and Japan. In Google, it's US, UK, and Germany. But iOS has a majority on the amount of money they make out of app stores. Right. So this kind of tells you that if you were making that zombie kill game and you kind of wanted to choose between one platform and just stick with one, you would have to make your options here, whether you want to go Android or you want to go Apple, pick up on whatever your strategies are. And then the other question that comes up in mind for you guys is that, for everybody in fact, is that, hey, I'm either a Flash developer or I'm a web developer of some sort. I'm not sure how to do games. I have an idea for a game, but I'd like to actually do. I'm not a native developer, and I'm not sure how to go about it. So there are applications that provide you an opportunity to run your web apps inside of on the native applications. There's something called as PhoneGap. This Adobe owns this now, and you can run your HTML5 code inside it. So if you had a web app that you're now wanting to put out to people, this is the route that you would go by. And if you're a handheld or console developer, like you knew how to use 3ds Maya, 3ds Max, Maya, you were writing 3D applications, now you wanted to develop 3D applications for mobile phones, you would have to either write your own engine, which is a costly proposition, or you would pick one of the 3. We kind of went to Unity 3D because we wanted to be in the market immediately. So from the time of switching from 3DS handhelds or handhelds to going into iOS or smartphone development, we were up and running in 6 months. That's what an engine does to you. It allows you to shorten that time into the market. It's like it says, okay, here's the engine, this is how you would go about it. Provides you all the tools to actually jump on and develop games. Whereas if you were writing your own engine, it would probably take a year and a half before the engine is mature enough to even put out content, which is like competitive, okay? And why should I be competitive? We'll talk about that, obviously. All right, so now, this is one of the graphics that has been provided by Flurry. This talks about loyalty of where people rate loyalty to the application, loyalty by application category. Loyalty just means how many times do you use that? Like retention is the word. Okay, how loyal are you to an application? This is all available on Flurry's website, and if you see, it actually rates people on how many over 90-day period they rate about how many people retain an application. So the highest frequency and the highest loyalty is on communication and news. But social games also rate very high on the rating. That means they are the most frequently used, but the retention rate is approximately around 30%. That means by 30 days, you would have probably lost that guy. So you're not thinking, okay, well, zombie kill, fine, I had that idea. And by the way, premium games are here, single player games are here. Means that they are not being used that much, but their loyalty is a little higher. That means if you have paid for that game, you will play that game over a longer period of time. That is a premium game. Whereas a freemium game is like, I downloaded a game, it was good, but now there is something new, I want to move over. That's where you lose retention. That's why the retention is lower. But you play more of that because either it has a social component where you're bringing in friends and like, engaging people and keeping them. That's what it is. So now you're thinking, all right, so what type of game should I be making? Part of it is related with whether you want to go premium or freemium. So if you're making a premium game, you can have a higher retention, but the frequency of use will be lesser. He will not use that game as much. What does that mean? That means he will buy it once for $1 or $1.95 and you're done. He will play it longer, but you're done. You can't make any more money on that. So if you spend 2 years working on a game, like awesome game, right? Like Infinity Blade or whatever, right? You wrote your own engine to compete with Unreal and everything, but you could only earn $10 out of that. It's over. It's one buy, you're over. Whereas on social games, it's a higher risk. That is, there's a chance that you will lose more people, but then there's a chance of earning more in that. But social games don't apply to every game. You can't make every game social. So again comes back to thinking about, hey, that zombie kill game that I was thinking about, I have to make it social, but I really have to think what that social means for that game. My friends are now zombies in the game, so they will come and attack me. That's maybe one of the angles. It's like that's how your friends get engaged. It signs into Facebook and gets all your friend names and then assigns names to zombies saying, Kamesh is now like a zombie who's attacking me. Safdar is one of my friends sitting up here in the corner. Like he looks like a zombie, but now. So he is attacking me. So I'm more engaged about it. I'm thinking, oh, Safdar, you came by and I kind of chopped your head last night, So that creates engagement and that drives more of the revenue in that game. If Safdar attacked my house, I'm thinking, how should I take Safdar down the next time he's around, So, and you start going after bigger and bigger guns. And in social games, what happens is, so this is the revenue pattern for freemium versus premium. And as you can see, over a period of time, like premium was really king till about last year, and now people are saying, well, you know what? We are done with just one buy. We want to do more. We want to actually make the game once and earn many times out of it, which is what a freemium gives you. Whereas a premium just says, fine, you're done, buy it for say $20, even if it is a $19.99 type of a game, right? You buy it once and you're done. Whereas social, I was here at the Flurry presentation last time, and they said that average transaction on that is $14. That means anytime you're buying, you're probably buying around $14. That means, and because you're using it many times over, there are so many opportunities that you can make those $14 every time, which is a better strategy rather than just premium games. But having said that, not all games are social. You really have to pick what your game should be. Without just putting a social component on top of that does not mean anything. Okay? People just treat it like a premium game with a social component in it which just doesn't do anything. You really have to sell the game. You really have to sell the game because the App Store is very competitive. There are 600,000 games. It is very competitive. You cannot just think, I'm going to throw something out there and people are going to buy it. No, they have to have a reason to buy it. They have to have fun playing that game. And everything that you design or everything that you kind of put in has to have a reason for it to exist, without which that feature is just stupid to write. Yeah? So what I was talking about here is that you acquire, you engage, and the same loop that everybody talks about. I think Zynga does that very well. Yesterday there was a Zynga talk. I'm sure you heard about how to acquire people, how to sort of like engage them more, and how to retain them. Zynga kind of discussed that all the strategy. I'm not going to go into that. We're kind of making a mobile social game. We'll stick to that. And we talked about premium versus freemium. The other thing that happens, which is very interesting, is phenomena which is now happening is that when you're thinking about a game, you're thinking, should my game be a boy game or a girl game? Soft games, which are kind of girl games, where you dress up characters and other things, they also do very well, you know. But in that definition of zombie kill that you wrote, if you had said it was a girl zombie and I would dress it up, that would become a pink game. And if it were a zombie which is going to come and attack me and I'm going to chop off his head, that's a boy game. So basically you'd have to figure out which one is your game strategy. You know, so pink versus blue, what do you want to do? And this is that numbers which tell you. And again, as you see, the average per transaction in this type of games is around $14. Like, you know, somewhere around there in the middle. Between, if you add up both and then you divide, kind of lines up at 14. This is for the freemium games. So any game you pick, the average is about $14. Whether be it a pink game or a blue game. This is another important thing. If you see how people spend money based on their ages, I believe Ashish talked about it yesterday, you will see that the people in the younger zone spend more time, whereas the guys 25 and above spend more money. So if you were making a game which is like, you know, which is a zombie baby game, you probably may not be making as much money out here, because kids will probably get attracted to it with the type of graphics that you will present and the design that you presented as compared to the guys. So, you know, zombie babies getting together and just tossing around flowers, not cool. You know, nobody will buy that. Whereas here, you know, cool looking zombies with one leg and like moving in random animations and killing each other, awesome. Because these guys spend money. And these guys want to be these guys anyway. You know, the young kids want to be the elder kids. So they spend more time playing that game, whereas these guys actually buy more. So freemium model works on that. You know, there's about 10% of people who will always want to buy the game or buy products from the game, whereas there are people who will grind for it. You know, so freemium has two policies. You can either work for it or you can buy it. And that's how the world economy also works. You know, so you can invest more money. That's my priority. That's what I would like to get, or you can sort of work hard for it. Yeah. So we kind of decided that, okay, fine, I've kind of decided what I want to do, either social or premium. I've decided that, fine, it's going to be probably a boy game, like, you know, and it's going to appeal to 25 to 34 years old. And the next thing that you kind of want to decide is that, okay, for what form factor should I decide? Because now, if you look at our original slide where we were talking about different form factors, there was an iPhone or a phone, smartphone, tablet, a mini tab, and there was a note, which is different form factors, different resolutions. So you're now thinking, which one should I optimize my game for? Because on what form factor does it look good? And your development strategies all are structured around that decision. So the question that you have to answer is, how do people use the phone? So in tablets, if you see, usually when you have a tablet in hand, you're probably sitting on a couch and playing and enjoying what is going on. You know, so you're immersed in that, you're kind of enjoying that. You know, whereas when you're on the phone, you're kind of doing something on the quick with one hand and then moving on. You know, so if your zombie game is a quick, like, you know, kill session for 5 minutes, you know, kill session for like 10 seconds. I want to do a quick kill session so I can increase my gold. You probably put it on an iPhone. Whereas if you want the people to enjoy strategy and sort of sit and decide how to build your world and things like that, you probably put it on a tablet. So this is where you're deciding about what form factor should you build your game for. And that has a big bearing on what your game design will look like and what development strategies you will have, or like, in how will your camera be? Will it be first person? Will it be God? Or, you know, so many things that will come by. So those are the decisions that you will make. Yeah, and by the way, the other important thing that happens to be, like, you know, we should discuss about is your rank. Now, if you see from this graph, you will see that it's pretty steep in the front. That means only the top 10% of the guys are ever making money, or really big money, right? In 2010, the green line was pretty steep, meaning that only the guys who were in the top 5 were always making money. Whereas the guys in the 60th ranking, which is pretty good by the way, you should have, I was watching somebody say that if you are supposed to be in the top 10, you have to have at least 80,000 downloads. If you have to be in the first 50, you're only about 25. I think he's talking about the US store. There are different stores have different numbers. But the point is, if people have downloaded you for 80,000, that means your game is really good. And people are sticking by it, and people are talking about it. It has already gone viral. And you're making money only there. The good news is, if you see the 2012 line, more interesting games are coming by now. So what does this mean? Means that, well, your game started off somewhere here, climbed up, but because there is other newer games coming by, it is dropping down. But it has stayed high up on the revenue, right? You're still making money, right? So what does that mean? That means more and more nicer games are being made. So that means all the games that were ever here kind of slide off back. They will still make money as they go down. And then a newer game comes by, right? So this is the curve, and I'm only thinking in 2012, you'll probably have a much fatter curve, meaning that the games which were really good will still continue to make money even if their ranking falls. So it's not always going to be like, or it's only going to be rank based. It's like only top 10 make money. It's not going to be like that. It's if your game is quality, you will make money. Eventually, probably there'll be a better curve, so that the rankings don't matter. Like your game is your game. It is good because it's really good. Yeah. Sorry, say that again. This is the revenue per rank. Ranks are in the bottom, right? And that's the revenue. Yeah, vertical is the percentage of money made in the average revenue that is made in the App Store completely. Basically, rank versus revenue. So if I'm in the top 10, I'm making that much money, 90% all the time. So if if there's 100 rupees ever to be made in the whole App Store, if you're the top 1, you're probably making 90. Rest of all the guys at that time are making only 1 or 10. All right. So you're thinking, all right, I've got all my kind of questions answered. I've kind of decided that I want to make a freemium game which is social, and I want to know what age group I want to make for. I want to now know. So I kind of know that what form factor I want to make for. So you're thinking, all right, great, that's kind of decided. But once I make this game, how do I know that I'm doing good? So you kind of made some assumptions and you went about it and said, okay, this is the game that I want to make. So you make that game and you kind of deploy in the market. But if you don't do analytics on it, you will probably never ever get the data back saying how good you're doing. What features do people like? How are people downloading this game? Why, why is it going down? That's something that you would like to measure. So you would have to build in analytics tools into your application for that. Meaning that, okay, well, I've built my game. I think everything is good, but that's your perspective of the world. Does the world agree? What does this answers? If you put in an analytics tool, it'll tell you how many people downloaded it, how fast it went up, and how easy is it going down. And if you see, interestingly, the curve that you see on this is generally the curve that is for a premium game. That means starts off quickly, but then stays there for a while and starts dropping off. So all applications iOS Store will always have that curve. They will start off, reach a peak, and then drop off. Which is why you have application updates, which is as soon as you see that your curves is dropping and you have a threshold that you put saying that I don't want to lose more than my 40% customers, the moment you hit 40% customers, you say, fine, I'll put out some 3 or 4 cool new features that people are always looking for, but I didn't have time to develop. Update, boom. Right away, what happens? The curve picks up, boom, right away. Your revenue goes up, right? So it drops off, then the moment the update comes in, your chart goes up. More and more people come and start playing that. Then starts dropping again because it has to drop. What has to go up has to come down. Starts dropping again. Then you figure out, okay, I gave those nice features last time. Now I'm going to add social to it. Boom, the application goes up again. You know? So by giving updates to your application, what you can do is you can control how that line drops down and then goes up again. So that's what's nice about Apple Store. And you have to build in strategies into your application about how do you give newer content. The other strategy is your application is probably same, but you probably have put in new environments. You put in new characters. You put in new guns. You put in new blades that you're chopping your zombies with, right? So right away you'll see the curve go up again because now there is new content. People want to play it. People want to buy it. So your revenue goes up. Okay? Immediately it'll start dropping again, maybe in a month or two. You put in newer content again, it'll go up again a little bit. But by the time kind of game goes old, and it will die out. It will die out. Generally about 6 to 8 months, it's gone. You have to sort of work on a newer title from there. But you can control the life of it and you can earn more money from doing these things. That is DLCs, downloadable content, or offering updates. So when you write up your design, you probably should say, well, you know, I have only time to develop the 5. Like, you know, not a problem. I will come back and sort of give another update, which will have the 7th and 8th, 6, 7, 8. So I'll make more revenue. And then 9 and 10, which will again make me more revenue. So it is not a bad thing that you're only doing 5 things, but do 5 things right. Because without that, your application will go into oblivion. Nobody will even know it exists. And of course, you have to do marketing strategies around what that app is. I know other people talked about it. I'm not going to get into that. We are going to stay focused on technology, how to do this. Okay? So definitely make sure that you put in analytics tools. The other thing that everybody talks about is, like, you know, ad space, real estate on mobile phone. Yeah. Yes.
Is available?
You know, I'm not much of an analytics guy. I work on making sure that these apps work directly with the architecture that we are putting together for the application. I will say most of these apps offer the same features, but they probably offer in one or the other different way. I can't compare one versus the other, or I can't say use this or use that. We use App Annie and Flurry. That's what I can say. Alright, so real estate, right? On your games. Yesterday Flurry was talking about that, director of Flurry in India, he was talking about how you can make more money by the user is not even buying anything, he just wants your real estate, right? And you put up an ad, you can make money out of that, you know? So that's the lure of ads. It's like the user doesn't do anything, but you're still making money. As you can see, in this, the freemium has totally taken over the ads. So if you're only thinking, I have a premium game, I want to put in more ads and make more money, that's not going to be working for you. You probably have to rethink the whole strategy of how do I go freemium with this? My title was successful, now I have to start thinking about how to make it freemium so more people download it and I can start putting more content into it so that I can sell more and more out of that. So this is one of the comparisons between IAP and virtual goods. And these are the networks that actually provide you that opportunity where, you know, you've got Tapjoy, you've got Super Rewards, Playhaven, and again in future Zing ads are going to come out. So what they do is they ask you for your real estate, and as soon as you either start your app or you come from, you resume your app, they show a advertisement and they charge the person who's putting this advertisement for money, for real estate for you. So if you do anything extra on that, you either get game gems, which is what an incentivized ad is. Tapjoy will give you games, gems. For example, if you're playing a freemium game and you want gold in the game, but you don't want to buy. So what do? You go to Tapjoy, there is a whole table about how you can make the gold, see a video, play a game, see this app, they'll give you 5 gems each. Quickly you buy that thing and then you move on. That's one way of earning gold. But what has happened is that the guys who are providing that ads, you've interacted with that ad, meaning that, there's a car ad. I'm thinking of buying a car. It just sort of scrolls by. And when I go back to actually, and I got 5 gems out of, like, looking at that ad. When I go buy my car, I probably think of this ad because, like, it appeared in my advertisement when I was playing the game. I was engaged in the game and I remember it, which is really cool. So the car people are actually selling these ads. So everybody makes money in that, and you make money in that as a part of as being a game developer. The ratios are different for different people. That's not important. The point is you're making money. And the other thing we talked about is for all freemium games, you need to have social networks, but again, each of these social networks have different features. Most of them have almost the same. There is a comparison either in Wiki or I can't remember what it is. There is a clear comparison on how each of these networks are. And Zynga has put out yesterday, Zynga was talking about their own network of friends. What I'm trying to tell you is that you don't have to build a network or you don't have to write for that one. There are people providing services for this. Make your game more interesting because of that. So look into these options for yourself. Yeah, how much time I have? Sorry? 15, 20 minutes. Okay, we'll leave it open for question for next 5 minutes maybe. All right, see, so looking into the future, right? I would definitely advise that you look into cloud because that's one of the biggest things happening. And what I have seen is that nobody has figured out how to use cloud interestingly till now. There are some applications that are doing really interesting stuff with cloud. Like Apple is really big on that. They always do everything through cloud. But games, I haven't seen a big game which has used cloud. So, and there are a lot of cloud providers, actually cloud service providers. So what I would suggest is that go back to your games and when you're looking at, thinking about that zombie kill game, maybe if you've customized your zombie, you probably want to put him up on the cloud. So any other device that you're playing, you probably have the same customization on your cloud. That's a very simple way of just doing that. So so now people are interested in buying cool hats for the zombie or a cool weapon for your own zombie. And they don't have to buy on different devices. So people are like, yeah, I've invested money, I would like to use it on a different device, So that's a nice feature. It's always a nice feature. And every time you think about the customer, every time you think about offering something which is good, people will buy more. So you let people own their money instead of charging them many times. And cloud does that really well for you. All right, so that kind of ends my discussion, but I do want to talk about games for Indians. So I know most of us play all the games that are probably all there on the Apple Store in US, but the India store is also pretty vibrant. There are very nice apps that are coming, but not all apps that get released in Apple are here because people don't wish to deploy it here. And there are a lot of people here in India who say, how do we make games for Indians? What are the games that Indians look for? So interesting thing where you have to go is, I'll just offer 3 pieces of things that I want to talk about. Here in India also, you've got Android, which is sold about 60%, about 57%. Symbian is still ruling. BlackBerry is about 12 to 12%. But you see, iOS is about only 3%. It's only about 3%. So if you're thinking about a game which is just appealing to only Indian senses, like a Dabang game types, whatever. Salman Khan just does his pelvic thrusts here and there, you shake the game like that, whatever. So may not appeal to everybody, but does probably appeals to Indians. So maybe it will sell only in India. So for that, your strategy will be totally different, which is you would prefer an Android as compared to an iOS. You would actually be doing games on Android and not iOS. Yeah? And that's exactly what I was talking about, is like design for games for Indians, monetize for Indians, because what usually happens is whenever these premium games appear on the market, they don't sell as well in India because the target market is in US. $1 is 50 rupees. I'm looking at buying a shoe for my zombie. It's probably $2. I'm like, seriously? No, I think my zombie is okay. I'm just going to probably buy a weapon. That's what I'd like to buy. So your sale options just goes kaput. So when you're thinking about India, you have to think in Indian terms, and you have to think about Indian economy before you actually put those prices up. They may not work globally, but the same game can not actually be working in two app stores with the same, with a different monetization policy, because people just go to the different store, download and play. So you have to really think about your games and localize them for Indians also. Again, localization is a big thing that I kind of believe in. I feel if it is a local game with Hindi in it in some way, more people will download. By the way, the guy who brings milk to my house has an Android phone, which is the latest Android phone, and he does not know what it does. So I asked him, I said, why to buy this phone? He's like, well, it was the coolest thing available, so I bought it. But I'm thinking, okay, well, he thinks that. I asked him, I said, do you play games on that? He says, what games? I don't know what games there are. Then I showed him, hey, there's the games. Then he started downloading apps and other things, and he's playing games, but he's only playing premium games, and he doesn't understand anything of it. He taps a bunch of places. I have to show him every game that is there. So, like usually he corners me every time in the morning and says, how do you play this game? Show me. So, but if it were localized, he would probably be spending that much. Why? Because that phone that he bought was about 34,000 or 36,000 rupees, which is about $800 or $600. A milkman bought a $600 phone. I don't own a phone that costly. So people want to spend. They do want to spend, but you have to know what they want to buy, which is what is important. And I think you really need to focus on that one, which is what the last point is, that you consider localization. It's really important. And when I say consider localization, I don't say just think about it and it will magically happen. The point is, when you're developing an application, you have to start thinking what goes into texture, what goes into text, how am I going to make it Unicode so that when I switch my language, it immediately will switch to a newer language. So I can take it to China, I can take it to, say, India, sell it into Tamil Nadu, sell it into Kannada, Karnataka, have a different strategy there, think about these lines. But before you go there, you have to make sure that your technology can support it. That's what I'm trying to tell here. Yeah, so, coming back to that, let's come back to that one slide that started this whole discussion. So it looks like my zombie, I really like, what's the guy who made Ishkia? What's his name, director? What's the guy? Yeah. So I really like his movies, yeah? So they appeal to all sorts of people in India, right? They go rural as well as they go in the city. So if I'm thinking of a zombie game for India, I'm thinking he speaks really foul language and is is very violent and has a dhoti on it. So that's what I'm